One of the most surprising things that we found in this research was just how much the COVID-19 pandemic has been both a blessing in disguise, but also a curse in some ways to the work of promoting open government reforms around the world. So, on the one hand, the pandemic has created an incredibly high new level of public interest in fighting corruption and making sure that emergency relief efforts do not go to waste. And at the same time, it's enabled civil society groups to become really creative with how they engage communities in civic participation efforts. So, organizations using creative techniques and leveraging new technologies to engage communities in conversations about transparency and civic engagement. This has really helped widen the breadth of engagement for a lot of organizations working on these issues. But at the same time, it has limited the depth that we can go into our conversations on open government reforms, especially in light of the restrictions on face to face interactions. This has also made it really more difficult for elite and professional NGOs to have meaningful relationships with grassroots local groups, especially if they have not previously worked together before. We know that trust building is essential to any collaboration. And so without those face to face interactions, it becomes harder to build new bridges to combat these challenges of corruption and promote open government reforms more broadly.
The pandemic has produced a surge in corruption with scandals emerging around misuse of emergency relief funding around the world. But it's also producing a surge in anti corruption, in public anger and momentum for reform. And this is a huge opportunity to make major strides with regard to anti corruption reform. But that can only happen if elite and grassroots civic actors come together to make progress in this important window of opportunity. So far, we haven't seen those civic collaborations at the scale or depth needed, but it's not too late. Remote modes of working are drawing people closer together in places with good connectivity, but they are increasing isolation in places where there's limited bandwidth or connectivity, especially in terms of the exclusion of grassroots actors in those environments. So, this is a very important time for donors and elite actors to deliberately try to mitigate that digital divide by reaching out to grassroots actors, helping make technological tools more accessible to them, and using new approaches to connect to communities, such as use of radio more and also establishing local liaisons who can follow up in person with citizens who may have less internet access.
In terms of the practical recommendations from this research, I want to highlight three key recommendations for anyone reading the paper. Number one, for all of us who care about open government reforms, the pandemic should remind us just how important it is that we link our open government priorities to the everyday headlines and top priorities of people, of everyday people in our countries. Again, we've seen this huge surge of interest in fighting corruption and in making sure that COVID relief funds are not wasted. And it's an important reminder of just how much progress we can make to implement open government reforms when we show people very clearly and simply how these issues are connected to the top priorities of the day. The second practical recommendation is a reminder of just how important it is that we collaborate to solve these daunting global challenges. Clearly, COVID-19 is a shared global challenge, and it requires shared global coordination from so many different actors for us to effectively respond to it.